everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to a book I wrote. It's called Follow. My book looks at spirituality, but not just from a psychological, metaphysical aspect of a human being, but also an earthly aspect as well. Typically, when we think of spirituality, we think about the psychological mind, about love and caring and sharing and creativity and intuitiveness and things like that. And those are all metaphysical feeling aspects of a human being. But I also focus on the earthly aspect as well. Oftentimes in the book, I refer to it as the earthly sacral aspect of a human being. And so when we descend into earth reality, we make this descent, we into a body, into a mind. We are forced to play an ego from either our right brain or our left brain. And so we're forced to play an aspect of ourselves from a super duper polarized masculine or super duper polarized feminine aspect. And so this is unholy, if you will. This book really was written to bridge the gap between the two, between the conscious and the unconscious mind, so we could actually make an ascension off the earth plane. You know, when we think about ascension, we should think about balancing the left and the right brain. You know, the left brain is represented as Adam in Christianity, if you will, the reptilian brain, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so when you think about ascension, think about a plane. You know, if you had a plane that was super duper feminine, had a super duper huge right wing, but the left wing was super duper small, could that plane take flight? And it couldn't. You know, it couldn't take flight, let alone stay in the air. And so as a result, the plane will never get off the ground. It will remain earthbound. And so that's the purpose of earth reality, which has now descended into a hellish state, if you will. They don't want people to get off the earth plane because, you know, by staying within this realm, we stay slaves, if you will. We're slaves for the elite. I call them the Baphomet magicians that orchestrate this false reality. Excuse me. So it's important to bridge the gap between the left and the right brain, and look at ourselves in its totality in order to live life in integrity and to not have a desire to be in physicality. It's always desire that brings us back into a mind and a body. And so when we look at, for example, in American culture, the forefathers that wrote the Declaration of Independence and so forth, they said that we're here for the pursuit of happiness. And so pursuing happiness is not actually having happiness. The powers that be, they have happiness. They have their sacral earthly aspects so they can manifest everything that they want. But we're only here to pursue it. And so it is desire that actually makes us a slave, a desire that makes us a slave to our nature. In Christian theology, it talks about how Eve will live for her husband. In other words, her husband is the reptilian aspect of herself. She will live for stuff. You know, she will live for Saturn, which is the Greek god of the material. That governs our reality. She will live for Satan, basically. And so, you know, it's time to bridge the conscious and the unconscious together and become aware and enlightened, so we can actually make our ascension, if you will. So I just like to give that example, that plain example, if you will, just to kind of give people an understanding of what ascension really means and how everything in our reality is based upon the mind, if you will. So the last chapter I talked about, mind control, is actually called Giden Kin Controle. And I'm sorry if I actually massacred that word, if you will. You know, my ex-husband was more of the German speaker, but you know, I didn't really learn a whole lot of German from him. But I was more French, if you will. It just sounds a little bit more, you know, feminine, I suppose. But anywho, it's really the German word for mind control. And so I really focused on how the Christ child, whenever you're born into earth reality as a divergent, and so, you know, although, if you will, I'm more right brain feminine, I also have my sacral aspect of me as well. I have my awareness, if you will. Although it's not something brought to the forefront fully, it's still there. And so when you're divergent, you are definitely closely monitored, you're closely watched, And there's a lot of different, mind control technologies that are used against you to actually take out your light, if you will. Because when we think about Earth reality, this matrix environment, this false reality, you can't have truth here. This whole reality is based upon lies, glamour, illusion. And so when the truth shows up, it's like, okay, it's time to destroy everything. And so when you have beings like me walking around, it is it's a threat. It's a threat to the system. Eve has the ability to destroy the matrix within her DNA. And so I kind of scoff and laugh at the New Age movement because it talks so much about consciousness, yet it facilitates an environment to destroy real truth and consciousness. And so I'm here to combat that. I'm here to actually bring light to illusions and light to glamour, and actually demonstrate and show what real consciousness is really about. And so, I know that the last chapter was really over many people's heads because, in our patriarchal society, we're all about, things being very much like mundane. Nothing is necessarily supernatural. And so, when people think of mind control technologies, they think, oh, that's supernatural. In a way, it's not. If you think about the universe and everything and everyone within the universe, everything carries a vibration, everything carries an energy. And so since everything carries an energy, it's able to be controlled, including human beings. I know it's like, what? Yes, including human beings. Like I made the comment one time before, if you go to the hospital and your heart stops, they take a defibrillator and they shock you back to life. They shock you back to life with electricity. And so since they shock you back to life with electricity, it goes to show that you are an energetic being. And so when I started to wake up and then my knowledge was being unlocked within my DNA, I started to experience a lot of energy attacks. And so, the thing is that in physicality, we have another dimension above it, which is called, people refer to it as the fourth dimension or the astral plane. And so the beings that actually control our earth reality, the elite, control it from the astral plane. And so you can just think of a human being as kind of like being etherized on a table, living in a false altered reality, if you will. Like the Animus, if you look at Assassin's Creed, you see the assassins are uploaded to a system called the Animus. And so they're not really doing anything, but they're put in a simulation of it appearing that they are. And so, when you think about mind control technologies, they really, hook into your energetic field. And they can actually manipulate people, and they manipulate you, and it is used as a type of torture to really assassinate the Christ, to assassinate knowledge. Because when people are being afflicted with mind control technologies, a person can definitely react in a very irrational way. And what I call the Illuminati, they like to actually dismiss people as crazy. Don't listen to that person; they're crazy. Look at what they did. Look at what they're saying. And so they really definitely use the mind control technologies to discredit a human being. But if you really think about energy, and how our bodies are energy, and electronics especially, that's the electromagnetic field. Anything with an electromagnetic field can be actually manipulated. So that means that human beings who have an electromagnetic field can be manipulated. Electronics can be manipulated. Anything with electricity, which is all in atoms, if you will, can be electrically charged, so to speak. So I know it sounds a little Harry Potterish and supernatural, but it is true. So I talked about that in my last chapter. This chapter focuses on, it's called Torch the Sky. It's called Torch the Sky. And it focuses on actually ascending, giving up the mind and the body. Some people call this death. I don't like to call it death because, death doesn't really exist per se. We're immortals within a filthy coffin, as I call it, a body. But within ourselves, it takes Christ, it takes consciousness to animate this body. And I talk a little bit about the body too, and how we're used as batteries, if you will, to keep this energetic being going. That's living within the body. And it's funny because the things that we consider to be normal in hell, that's why we say hello. But the things that we consider to be normal in hell are not normal. They're not normal. For example, when we descend from our mother's womb, we automatically just begin burning in hell. And this is called aging. And so they, the creators of our false reality, they really paint a pretty picture of certain things that aren't pretty. And so, for example, when I was waking up, I saw things differently. Like when I would go get my nails done at the nail salon, at first I just kind of thought it was regular, that's what women do. But if you think about nails, they're dead cells. And so since nails are dead cells, it's perfecting death. You're always trying to paint a pretty picture of death. Nails are just dead. Like hair is dead, is dead, cells. And so when we see commercials about shampoo and conditioner and stuff like that, it's all about perfecting death. Everything. Yeah, I remember going into one day, I went to Target to get some deodorant, and it just dawned on me at that moment when I was looking at different deodorants, because there were so many to choose from. And I came across one that was like 24 hours protection or something, and 24 hours in protecting you against your odor. And so I thought to myself, why do we stink? Why does the human body give off an odor? And so, it gives off an odor because we're literally burning in hell. When you descend from your mother's womb, you begin to die here. And so the older you get, the more you're dying. And so that's just kind of some food for thought, so to speak, and really letting you know, where we actually reside, if you will. So the life review, there's a lot of information I'm giving in the life review, and I may make the video 2 parts depending upon how long it actually goes, because, there's a wealth of information here. It's a lot, if you will. So I focus on, in the beginning of the chapter, with Egyptian mythology. And with Egyptian mythology, I focus on the god Set. The god Set in Egyptian mythology. And so we know that Set mutilated his brother Osiris, the king of Egypt, because he was jealous of him. And he worked with 72 conspirators, which is eerily connected to the 72 tribes of Israel that created the Septuagint, which is the Old Testament of the Bible. But when we think about the word set, we think about like the set of a movie, if you will. And so the Matrix is nothing but a movie set. It's an environment that facilitates a restriction that produces an unconscious mind. It produces desire. And so it is the movie set that keeps us here, the environment. Once we're, dissociated, like for me, I was dissociated with sexual abuse at first. But once that happens and a child leaves their body, so to speak, they're able to be primed by the unconscious mind through the religions, through media and entertainment, education, government itself, the familial structure, and everything. And so I just talk about the set and how it facilitates the restriction. When you look at movies like The Hunger Games and Katniss, she didn't really become the Mockingjay until she destroyed the set. And so, Katniss in The Hunger Games represents the Christ. She represents the one who descended into hell to actually, destroy the system. She's like a system buster, or whatever the case is. And so, so going back to Set, if you will, it is the Set that actually holds us and keeps us down and oppressed and keeps us slaves here in reality, in earth reality. And it also goes back to Israel as well. Israel represents the Trinity. And like for example, if you look at the lyrics in the song, what is it? Terror Squad. It's called Lean Back. If you listen to that song, and one of the lyrics, it talks about the Trinity, and Fat Joe is talking about how they built they had the Phantom in front of Trinity Avenue, something like that, he said. And so the Trinity represents creating phantoms, because the Trinity is a separation. It's three separations of the mind. You have the right brain, the left brain, and there's a middle path. And that middle path should be the Christ, but the Christ is always disintegrated by Satan, which is the Satan is allegorically depicted as Saturn, which is the imbalance of the third eye. The third eye is always imbalanced here. In balance, the third eye is supposed to work, very, just to help a human being live in integrity. But when you're intentionally imbalanced and you're lied to, and there's omission of the truth, and you're fed a whole lot of satanic imagery and things like that, it definitely imbalances you, where you don't focus so much on the creator, which is the mind. Ultimately, the creator is the mind. You focus on the creation. And so when you're so focused on the creation instead of the creator, you're not able to manifest your desires. And so you live for your nature. You live for Adam. Eve lives for Adam. You live for the physical. So, I talk a little bit about that in the set, the Unholy Trinity. And so really this, Torch the Sky is about the life review, about when you're about to ascend and give up your mind and body, you will be brought to judgment. You will be brought to judgment by the people that govern this false reality. And so one thing I want you to know about judgment is all about the lowest taxonomy of knowledge. Judgment is not about the whys and the hows. Judgment is about the what. And so I'm just going to let you in on a little secret, if you will. Don't tell anyone. But anywho, you're not going to pass the life review. You're always going to be guilty here. That's just it. Sorry to say, so if you're striving to pass the life review or to pass judgment, you're automatically going to fail, because you can't please God in a body. And so the elite who govern this false reality, they are God. You can't please them. It even says this in the book of Romans, pretty much, that you can't please God within a body, because the flesh is weak, and then too, when you're actually altering the state, the psychological state of the mind, which is metaphysical, it makes the flesh sinful in a way. So I just want you to know that you're not going to pass the life review. It's something that's impossible to pass, because the body is always the creators always facilitate an environment that that forces your hand, so to speak. I always bring up the example about me being a little girl and my dad blindfolding me and saying, let's make a picture, and then he takes my right or my left hand, makes a picture, takes off the blindfold, and then says, oh, this is what you did. Although if I had the blindfold off, I would have done a different picture, and if he wasn't guiding my hand to make an ugly picture, I wouldn't have made that. So, you're just going to be guilty here. Just really accept the fact. I wouldn't say accept, but really just acknowledge the fact that we're slaves in this reality, and that the powers that be don't want us to have any type of any knowledge. They want us to just be dumb and stupid. Totally left brain, reptilian brain aspect of ourselves. That's just governed by them, governed by by Nazism, so to speak, by restriction. When you think of Nazis, you think of very super duper, just rulers, dictators, fascist beings. And so that's pretty much what the true elite are, not the elite that we see on TV, like the singers and actors and things like that. To me, those aren't the true elite. They get checks from the elite. If someone's giving you a check and paying you money, then you're not an elite. A true elite manifests. They have the ability to create matter. And so all of us, including the seeming elite that we see on TV, we're all in the same boat in a way, because we're slaves to the true beings that govern this reality. So, I focus on how they want us to, focus on the lowest taxonomy of knowledge, um, which is the what. They don't want you to focus on the why and the how. And so I make different examples throughout the book about this and the lowest taxonomy of knowledge. Like, say for example, if somebody raped someone. So say you're in your incarnation, you raped somebody. And so you're brought to judgment after you give up the mind and body. And they say, you raped someone, so as a result, you have to go back and reincarnate and be raped or something like that. I don't know. Say they tell you have to go back because, you raped somebody. Well, what if as a little kid you saw your dad disrespecting your mom? And when we think about kids, before the age of 6 or 7, you're in a theta brainwave frequency where your unconscious mind is really being programmed, shaped, and molded to really determine who you are. So really by the age of 6 or 7, it's pretty much, solidified who you are. Especially by the age of 3, the brain is forming at a rapid pace and soaking up all of the information within its environment. Excuse me. So, you're really, made into a personality beforehand. So if you're really seeing your dad beating your mom every day and, calling her a bitch and, saying all these different things, you automatically associate women with, with just misogyny, being misogynistic. And so, say for example, when you grew up before the age of 6 or 7, you listened to music such as, especially hip-hop music. Hip-hop music is very misogynistic and really objectifies women and just talks about, women's, their private parts, or I shouldn't say private parts, but, it talks about the sexual aspect of a woman in very disgusting ways and not honoring the woman. I'm not saying these things are private or bad, because they're not. In fact, in my book, I write to expose the contrary. But, they're really just objectifying women for their physiological looks is very misogynistic. So if you're a kid before 6 or 7 listening to that stuff, you objectify women. And, if you say, also you had a psychological split because you're listening to this music, but you grew up in a very religious household where women are covered up. And so they're not able to show their bodies. That's also religious programming, to show that women are not on par with men. Men don't have to cover themselves up, but women do. Say, I don't know, you watch a lot of movies, where women are objectified and, it's just a whole lot of factors that go into making us who we are. Say you become a lawyer. Say, one day you become a lawyer and with all those, different, different constructs that made you who you are. You look at the law, and so the law, it shows that women are not protected so much by the law. We have very patriarchal systems, a very patriarchal government system, and so rape is one of the hardest cases to prove without DNA evidence. So since you don't respect women anyway because of the music and the way you grew up and seeing all these different movies and things like that, and you're like, I can get away with raping somebody, you rape somebody. And so when you're brought to judgment, the creators of this reality are not going to say, because you listen to hip-hop music and because you saw your dad beating your mom at this age, and because since you had such an inflated patriarchal aspect of looking at women and you couldn't have really good relationships with them and you didn't have a good relationship with your mom, we understand that you raped someone and so you're scot-free. They're not going to say that to you. I'm just going to let you know. They're going to say you're a rapist, and that's just what you are. We don't care if we blindfolded you. We don't care if we forced your hand. It's your picture. And so that's just how it works here. I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry to be the light bearer of dark news. But, that's just pretty much how they focus on, our reality. They want you to be dumb and stupid. And they don't want you to see that, like in this particular anecdote I gave in this scenario, the government structure itself, religion, the familial structure, all these different things painted a picture of this person being a rapist. And so when we are brought to judgment, it's not the people who facilitated the environment that actually created this monster, because they're monsters. It actually is the monster itself. So, for example, like in the astral, I'm very whorish. I'm very much a filthy, disgusting whore. And so, the thing is that during judgment, I'll be made to actually take on her sins as being a filthy, disgusting whore. But what about the whore maker? Does he get away scot-free? And he definitely does. He gets to get away scot-free because, he will make the case, because these beings are very evil, very smart, intelligent, if you will, very reptilian-brained, intelligent beings. So they know how to get around certain things and always find a way, a loophole. They're judges, they're lawyers in a courtroom. So they're always able to find a loophole to convict you. So you're going to be convicted. But, the people who are doing the conviction itself are the ones who orchestrated it in the first place. So it's a travesty to see how the soul is put through judgment and blame for a heart, if you will, that they did not facilitate. Our minds are definitely split off to create desires and create an unhealthy heart. When you see depictions of Jesus, oftentimes his heart is in chains because the heart is something that they make disgusting here. It's funny, especially when it comes to sex. My book is a lot about sex. And so when I think about like Sling TV and the commercials for that, they have like Dr. Ruth, and they have the couples talking about, you want to sling with us, comparing sling to swinging, to the act of swinging when you engage in like a condoned adultery, and usually in an orgy type fashion. And then there's a commercial with a Sling TV commercial with a girl who goes to get her coffee at a coffee shop, and she's like talking about how she has a broken heart. And to me, it's such an oxymoron, because in this society, we're taught in one construct that, swinging is tongue-in-cheek and fun. But if in a religious context, it's something filthy and nasty. And so that causes a broken heart, because the heart is put against itself, the right and the left brain. The heart is the mind. And so the right and the left brain are put against itself, whereas in one aspect, it's all wonderful. And in the other aspect, it's all nasty and filthy. And so when I'm brought to judgment, I'm going to be brought to judgment with this heart and say, this is your heart. It's not my heart. It's the heart that was given to me under a restriction in this physical environment. And so, the powers that be don't really want you to recognize that. They don't want you to have that awareness. They don't want you to have that knowledge, because it's very important that they get away scot-free. When it comes to satanic ritual abuse victims and, victims that are mind controlled, they always create a way within their victims for them to actually not have anything to do with it. And so, I just talk about that in the life review, and how you're not going to pass the life review, and pretty much how it's a travesty how it goes. I also focus on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And, many people may be wedded to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is fine with me. This is a controversial book. As far as I'm concerned, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is very representative of the life review. When it talks about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it talks about how the soul will be faced with angels and demons, pretty much. And so you'll be actually shown your left and your right brain in a disconnected way, not in holy matrimony, not in union with one another, but you, like, for example, with me, when I'm brought to judgment, I'll be shown the angelic, angel, the angel, the right brain aspect of me that's loving and caring and so forth. But and so, during this incarnation, identify with being a very devoted mother, devoted wife, a loving mother, all these different things, a really great teacher, a really hard worker and that type of thing. And then the left brain will be presented. And because I'm super duper loving, I'm super duper menacing and nasty and filthy. So that part of me will be presented, so that astral self, and I'll be made to feel these feelings. And the thing is that they actually introduce the right brain aspect of us to actually heighten the I guess what you would call the negativity of the devils, or the unconscious desires and tendencies of the id and the left brain. It's like, oh, I'm really wonderful, and then you see how really nasty and filthy you are, and it's like, oh wow, I'm really bad. So the beings that control this false reality, they get a good meal. They get a good meal off of seeing a soul fight itself, not being united, not being in holy matrimony. It's kind of like, if you're smart, if you will, they don't get the best meal. It's like going to the McDonald's, eating off the dollar menu. But if you are really put against yourself and dumb and stupid, it's like eating at Ruth Chris, if you will. It's like the best meal ever. They get the appetizer, and the main course and the dessert. And so the more stupid you are, the more they're able to just enjoy you and enjoy to seeing you suffer. And so, but because the elite have really plateaued out of experiencing the material, they really don't have any life anymore. And so this really helps them to get an emotional charge, just driving you insane and to actually making you suffer and feel bad about yourself. Although, they themselves are feel guilt. They're very guilty beings. And so when you look at movies like Eyes Wide Shut, where they're at their little, Illuminati meetings, they have to wear a mask among themselves. You're all, in the same boat, so to speak. So I don't really understand why they have to wear masks among themselves, but they feel the need to conceal what they actually do to people because they don't want to look at themselves. However, because of their sociopathic nature, they convict a soul for being guilty and not wanting to show themselves. So it's very sick and sadistic, if you will. So I really focus on the life review and how it goes, how you're not going to pass, how we focus on the lowest taxonomy of knowledge. And one thing I want to talk about is the Matrix. I oftentimes refer to the Matrix in my book. And the scene that where Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus go see the Merovingian is very important to the agenda of this so-called infamous New World Order of the elite, wanting, this straw men, stick men who are just governed by their reptilian left brain, if you will, with no awareness, no knowledge, what have you. When Neo goes to see the Merovingian, he tells the Merovingian he's trying to get to the key maker. Because the key maker leads him to the architect. And the architect, is like the high priest or the pope or whatever the case is, the leader of the Israelites. And so the Merovingian is like, why do you want to go see the key maker? The key maker is a means to do what? And so really the key maker is a means to be reincarnated, if you will. That's the end. You meet when you get to judgment, you actually will be reincarnated because they will find a way to convict you at judgment. And so when the Merovingian talks to all of them and talks to Neo, he tells him that the difference between he and Neo, and also a woman that he gives a dessert to. There's a woman that he considers to be so bourgeoisie in the restaurant that they're sitting in. He gives the Merovingian gives her a dessert, and so within that dessert is a program. And so in the program, he programs her to have an orgasm after eating this dessert. And so when he talks about the woman, he talks about how she really doesn't understand what's happening to her, what's happening to her body. You know, after a certain period of time, she doesn't care about why or what. You know, all she cares about is the feeling. And so all they want you to do is become an animal, become a mortal, not a spiritual or a psychological aspect, but just a mere mortal, just a mere feeling, taste, touch, smell, and hearing, you know, person. And it's also very striking that the woman that he gives this the orgasm to, the dessert to, she is blonde hair, super blonde, fair, blue-eyed. And so going back to Aryan, the Aryan race, if you will, you know, the Aryan race is a super duper unmelanated race that does not have a functioning third eye. They're stupid. You know, although Hitler said that the Aryan race is wonderful and they're the master race, they're the master race because that particular race, if you will, oh, sorry, I almost had an interruption, but that particular race, if you will, actually is a race of, you know, just no melanin. You know, just no melanin whatsoever. And so the melanin is actually stimulated by the third eye. And so, you know, since melanin is, you know, is actually, you know, since the third eye makes melanin, if you will, it creates insight. So when you don't have any insight, you have nothing. You know, you are really at the command of fascists, of Nazis, of the creators that actually make up this false reality. And so since you are at their mercy, without any type of intelligence whatsoever, you won't have any, you know, understanding that you are guiltless, that you are sinless, that you are Christ. You know, you are Christ that looks at duality. You're not the angelic ego, and you are not the unconscious astral aspect of yourself that they're going to show you during the life review. And so I call the life review the lie review. I call it the lie review because, you know, it is, it's a lie. This ego that I play is a lie. You know, this ego it's especially a lie because, like I've, you know, exposed in other videos, my consciousness is more patriarchal. So although I'm very feminine here on the astral, I'm very, you know, masculine, very much hater of women. So I love women here, right? I'm like Sappho's, you know, I'm very much a lover of women. However, in the astral, I hate women. On the astral, you know, I think women are like children. They should be heard and not seen. You know, I think women are the reason for the demise of, you know, this whole system, if you will. And, you know, you know, I definitely much resonate more with the elite, and I work with the elite, and I love the elite in that realm. You know, that's very interesting. You know, why I would do that, because you know, balance is what it's about, but I'm very much perverted. I'm very much a pervert in the astral realm, in a masculine, you know, a masculine self, if you will. And so, you know, that discrepancy is very shocking to me. And on judgment, it will be very shocking. But, you know, the more polarized you are, the better meal that the elite get off of you, you know. So it's very interesting in that sense. During your life review, like I said, you'll be shown the right brain and the left brain disintegrated aspects of yourself. And so, you know, it's important to know that the eyes are just cameras. You know, when we think about a camera lens, you know, it's very representative of the eye. And so this is the all-seeing eye. The camera actually records everything. That's why people who have near-death experiences, they often say that they have their life flash before them. And so really it's just your camera flashes, and you know, you just see certain parts of your life. And seeing certain parts of your life, these are very biased parts of your life. So they really take, I want to say they take the aspects of your life that you're really wedded to, either in a really good way or a really bad way. So say, for example, my role as a teacher, if I really was like, oh, I was a wonderful teacher, and I love kids, you know, they'll take that. That'll be a part of the flash, the 360 panoramic view of my life. And then if there's something really bad or whatever that I did, and they're like, okay, you know, she's really wedded to this. And so we'll take that, you know, we'll take that whatever, her hatred for, like, say, her daughter. Like, for example, in this incarnation, my astral self hates my child. In fact, my astral self wants my daughter dead. So it was very interesting to find this out because I was like, okay, I love my daughter to death. I would slip on a sword for her, but as an ego. But as an astral, it sees her as a something that keeps me bound, if you will. And it sees me as giving away my love instead of taking the love for myself to honor myself. And so, because it doesn't really resonate with illusions, so to speak, because the ego is all about illusions and being attached to illusions. It's it hates my daughter, and so I'll be able to feel that that negative aspect of myself during the life review. And so the snapshot, the 360 snapshot, if you will, of my life they may take that out. So anything that I attach myself to, they will take that out. And it was funny because waking up, I really tried to detach myself from a lot of my attachments and relationships, like my kid. I really tried to detach myself from her, detach myself from my career, just have some distance with it. And the more I tried to detach myself, the more those things were brought within my awareness. And so to me, it was just very interesting. Here, I was reading about doctrines of attachment, yet within the environment itself, those attachments were put more within my force field. I really tried to leave everybody behind, including my friends. I remember at one point, I left my job in Atlanta, moved back to Charleston with my mother, and, life just had no meaning. I had no meaning in life. Everything just kind of fell, the ground just fell from underneath me, and I really couldn't find my footing. And so I wanted to change careers. I didn't want to teach anymore. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I just picked up my stuff and I went to Columbia. My car got totaled. Lots of bad breaks, if you will. And so my car got totaled, and I really needed a job. And so or at least I felt that I needed a job. And so when I went to, I went somewhere else to find a job, all of my friends started popping up. And I didn't call any of them because, my sole purpose was to, find employment. And just to find myself and just to, have some time with myself alone so I could get to know me. So, gradually, once I got my footing and got grounded, I could integrate these different aspects back into my life, such as my friends. However, it was funny because I would run into my friends and they would feel upset and they would say, why didn't you tell us that you were here, and this, that, and the other. It was, or they wouldn't be upset, but, I felt a conviction because, I wanted to be by myself, but at the same time, I was just faced with these different aspects of me that were just trying to continuously hook into me, if you will. And so there was nothing that I can necessarily do. So, within my life review, they definitely, the powers that be definitely can't say, oh, well, attachments was something that caused you to stay earthbound, if you will, because I did everything within my power to to make sure that I had some distance between myself, the Christ that observes duality, and the ego that is, wedded to attachments and illusions and so forth. So I talk about, I talk a lot about that. I talk about, how the fact that no one can pass the life review. I talk about the set. I talk about, observing the ego from the astral, the left and right. I talk a little bit too about mind control. Although mind control was the last chapter, if you will. Mind control is very important because when you're toward the end of your incarnation, you really start to experience what I call energetic attacks. And so when you're experiencing energetic attacks, it can look like mental illness, like you have a mental illness from a clinical sense. Not a spiritual one, but from a clinical aspect. And so, like, when you listen to, like, Kanye West's songs like Power, and he talks about 21st century schizoid man, he's talking about the Christ. He's talking about the Christ. I know that, he may say, oh, well, that's not exactly the intention, whatever. But really, when you look at the agenda of the elite, they really aim to call the Christ crazy, so you don't listen to the knowledge, if you will, because everything here is upheld by glamour. But when the mind control technologies are very insidious, very insidious. If you think about cell phones and how we have cell phone towers and how the towers are actually used to activate the cell phones and to make them work, and how that's like electromagnetic, that's energy. Human beings are energy as well. And so we can actually be controlled a whole lot like any other type of energetic device, if you will. And I know that sounds really strange. However, using the defibrillator example, how we're shocked back to life with electricity. Everything in our reality is electricity. And so when I started to experience things such as synchronicities, and so synchronicities, out of all my mind control torture, I think synchronicities is one of the most devastating, because the synchronicity is a coincidence, but synchronicities are just coincidences that happen all the time, like all the time. So it becomes a type of torture, a mind torture. Like, say for example, if you had a coincidence where you said to yourself, I really would like some, chocolate cake or something like that. I really would like some chocolate cake. And then your boyfriend calls and says, hey, let's go get some chocolate cake. You would consider that to be a coincidence. You would say, man, I was just thinking about chocolate cake. That's awesome. Let's go get some, However, if that happened to you all the time, and say you're a boyfriend, say you thought to yourself, I really want some mushrooms. I really want some mushrooms, and I'm a feeling for some mushrooms. And then your boyfriend calls you the next day and he says, you know what? Let's go get some mushrooms. You would say, oh, okay, sure. And then the next day, you're thinking to yourself, I really, want to, I don't know, I want to take a trip to Bora Bora, or whatever the case is. And then your boyfriend calls and he says, hey girl, I just bought some tickets to Bora Bora. Want to go? At that point, you start to the ego starts to become very frightened. And so when we look at New Age, I call them false prophet gurus, if you will, and they're talking about how synchronicities are so wonderful. They're so wonderful, and they're so, these are aspects of these are aspects of awakening that lets you know that you're on the right track. That's a total lie. It's a bold-faced lie. And the Christ always comes to, expose the false prophets, if you will. But these false prophets are lying to you because ego death and ego dissolution is a very horrific experience. And so because it's such a horrific experience, it feeds the powers that be. It feeds their life force because they get a quickening from seeing you suffer. So, I really talk about that, and how in the life review, your suffering, if you don't have consciousness or awareness, your suffering looks like mental illness or something. And so your reactions are something that are used against you, so you're blamed for it. And so instead of this, it just looks on the surface like someone just called you and asked you to go to Bora Bora, have some chocolate cake, have some mushrooms, whatever it is. It just looks like normal, mundane things. And so I give examples, if you will. I give examples in the book that really talk about the mind control tactics, if you will, that were used. And so without my awareness, like in my next avatar doesn't have any awareness at all. My melanin is extracted to the point where it tipped the other way, and I don't really have much insight with the pineal gland. And so if I were to have these mind control tactics used against me, and these afflictions put against me on a life review, it just looks like I'm a crazy person. That's all it looks like. So, I just talk about that, and how mind control tactics are definitely used against our who we are, the ego, to convict you at judgment. And, this whole particular construct is used to kill Eve, to target Eve. In Assassin's Creed, they're looking for the mind of Eve, the disobedient one, the one who has knowledge. You can see this in various movies, like The Giver. The Giver is a dead giveaway about the Christ child. When we look at Jonas, Jonas is the Christ. He represents the sacral, the earthly feeling body. If you look at that movie, all the people in the movie, in the book, they don't have any sacrals. They're all, psychological, spiritual beings. And everything's about love and kindness and sharing and all that stuff. But there's an earthly aspect to us. And so they take medications to, to take away their sacral aspects of themselves. And Jonas is chosen. He's chosen to be the receiver of memory. He has, a job, unlike anyone else in that society. You ask yourself, why is that? Why is Jonas chosen? He's chosen to die, actually. He's chosen as the Christ to die because Jonas represents a divergent. Like, even going back to the movie Divergent, whenever you're divergent and you don't necessarily belong to, well, you belong to all the factions. Let's just say that, you're divergent because you could do anything. You're a god. Jonas is a god in the Giver. And so because he is a god, the elders who actually run their false matrix Stepford-like reality are afraid of him. And so they actually choose him to have a career that absorbs pain and suffering. And so in doing that, they hope that he will basically be destroyed. They will destroy him. And by destroying Jonas, they're destroying truth. And so Jonas, he definitely has a affinity for little kids. And that's interesting because in the movie, he has an affinity for children because Jonas still has a connection to his true childlike self, which is the Christ. The Christ is a child. The Christ is that's the utmost integrity that you have, is the child. That's the utmost integrity that you have. And so he likes working with children, and he's very fond of a little boy. I think his name is Gabriel. And he resonates with Gabriel because, in a way, symbolically, Gabriel is his inner child. But from a superficial level, Gabriel cannot be coddled when he's born into this society because Gabriel is a divergent like Jonas. He is a divergent. And so we see that Jonas knows that Gabriel's divergent because they share a memory. And the memory that they share is a memory of an elephant. And so the thing is that no one in the society knows what an elephant really is except for Jonas because he's able to have the secrets, right? As well as, and Gabriel lets him know, I know what an elephant is, just by touching him. And so it goes to show that Gabriel cannot be coddled because Gabriel knows that he's born back into hell. Kids always know this is hell. That's why they can't necessarily, when a kid is born and they're very much colicky, like they're very much, you can't soothe them or what have you. That kid is like, I know that my consciousness is going to be pressed out by the various constructs of the matrix to make me into this unholy shell of myself. And I'll be brought to judgment for the self that has been bestowed upon me. And so, the elders, they aim to fracture Jonas's consciousness by making him hold in his pain so they can get rid of truth. And so if they can get rid of the truth, then their matrix environment can survive. So, I talk about that. And, I think that that's pretty much what I'm going to focus on for now. I may come back and do a part 2, if you will, with any things that, I may have forgotten, if you will, because there's a whole wealth of information in the Torch the Sky, which is the life review. I call it the lie review, if you will. And I actually take an excerpt from Emily Dickinson's poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, because in that poem she talks about the various, seasons of her life, if you will, which is the life review. They take you through it all, but just know it's very important that regardless of the feelings, because you will be made to feel shameful about your life. They make us play a part in this reality, but they're feeling, because of the restrictions within this environment, we have feelings of hatred, and we have feelings of just things that we don't want people to see. And so they're going to expose those things in front of everyone and put you out in front of everyone to expose those particular, aspects of yourself that you would like to hide. But it's important to know that this has nothing to do with you. This mask that you play has nothing to do with you. This unconscious astral self that they're going to show you with all the hidden hates and things like that, and tendencies and desires and fetishes and things like that, that's not you as well. None of it's true, but they want you to believe it's true because they get a good meal off of it, and they're just bored elitists who have nothing to do. They've shopped and had sex and eaten at the best restaurants and things like that. So they just really have nothing to do but torture you. So they're very narcissistic, and they really just don't care. You're just a meal to them. So, that this chapter is just pretty much about exposing that. And there's a link in the comment section to purchase the book if you choose. It's a book that I think that you're not going to see a lot of information in other places. A lot of this information, like I said, is locked in my DNA. And so it really was something that came from within instead of without. And so I strongly suggest that, if you buck against a lot of the things I say, it's a good thing, because it lets you know that you need to integrate this aspect of yourself. Whatever you feel a restriction or a resistance to, you need to go towards it, because it's a part of you that's trying to keep you from yourself, so to speak. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in my next video.